Hello and welcome to Chat Room, presented to you by China Global Television Network. I'm Yang Zhao, CGTN reporter. It's been 13 days since Russia carried out its special military operation to its neighboring Ukraine, and last night both sides sat down and have the third round of peace talk, but unfortunately no solid progress has been made during the talk. Today I'll be joined by Ken Huang, chief editor of Russian service CGTN, Shen Shuwei, politics analyst, and Egner Tengen, independent commentator. And also joining us later will be our analyst and a stringer in Russia and Ukraine, including Alex Danilov and Dmitro Burtsev in Lviv, Ukraine, Mattia Sorby in Kharkiv, and Oleg Ostrikov in Moscow. And we also invite you to be part of this conversation by sending the topics and questions that you want us to talk in this chat room to stringer@cgtn.com. Okay, gentlemen, how about we start with the latest development on the battlefields? The Russian has proposed a new ceasefire in 5 Ukrainian cities starting 7 GMT Tuesday morning to evacuate civilians in Kiev, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Mariupol. So it seems now we have been through a very short ceasefire. Gentlemen, what was your overall evaluation to the current situation? Maybe we start from Tengen. Go ahead.
If you start looking at what's been proposed, the Russians have basically set up corridors that will lead to Belarus and Russia. So this might not be acceptable, well, probably will not be acceptable to the Ukrainians. That's why there has been no response to them. Their desire is to get the corridors going towards Poland and other places which are more friendly. The fear is that they would, the Russians, from the Ukrainian point of view, that the Russians might use refugees coming in to exploit them for propaganda purposes or whatever.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Mr. Tengen about the ceasefire. I believe there are a couple of issues that's related to the humanitarian corridor. Right now, the thing is, this corridor actually is implemented for its design purpose. I believe this is everyone's focus.
Yeah. Shuwei, do you think it's more, well, from my personal view, I think it's more likely that this situation is going to be a longer-term conflict.
Yeah, and especially for the humanitarian corridor, I think what is worrying now is maybe that will become another blaming game, because you see, for Ukraine government, they don't want those people to just run as refugees to Russia, and if all those people evacuated, and then Russian troops will go in and to take the full control. So I think for Ukraine government, that is a situation they don't want to see. And especially now we see a lot of disinformation and misinformation and a lot of fake news on social media. So I think many people are afraid of getting out, and they are not quite sure whether the humanitarian corridor is opened or is smooth or not. So people are really worrying. So I think the situation is not that good right now. Yeah.
Well, of course, it's not good. People are dying. I mean,
what
else can you say?
The risks are pretty high.
Don't sugarcoat it. The situation is really bad. Both sides are using disinformation, and they're weaponizing it. And this is really the problem. You have the Western media is always saying, and Western governments are always saying that China, everybody else is weaponizing the press. And what we see right now is that CNN and a lot of these U.S. stations are just taking a one-sided. They're trying to hype this up, and that is not helping. I mean, and it doesn't help if it's happening from the Russian side. My point is, people do not know what to believe. They're not getting a clear picture of what's happening.
Yes, indeed. Another issue is that right now these two sides, Russia finger pointing at Ukraine, Ukraine also finger pointing Russia, by utilizing this humanitarian corridor. There is so much information going on.
And it's not starting today or not starting yesterday, but for quite a long time, after all the time, both sides have been accused of each other for blocking those refugees
so
from
it's a blaming game, and later if the one side cannot handle this issue properly, then there will become a moral or political disaster for that one. So everyone is weaponizing this issue. So
对，昨天这
that
个
is very
其中一个
unfortunate.
最鲜
Yes,
明的例子
indeed,
是
gave
昨
you
天
an example
深夜的时
yesterday
候，是北京
evening,
时间
that
深夜
Beijing time really
俄
late
方代表
evening,
团团长
and the
梅金
head
斯
of the
谈判
Russian
谈判开始
delegation
前对媒体
before the
做
third
了一
round
个
of
声明
peace talk, he made
上来就指责呢
announcement
说是这个
by
乌东地区的
pointing
乌克兰的
the
地方
finger
武
to
装
the Ukraine
实行了这个
troops,
人盾这个
saying that they
这个
taking
这个
people
打
as
法
the
是吧
human
这个破坏了
shield,
这个人道主义
and
走
this is
廊，所以
totally
这
go
个调查
against
到现在
the
没有得到
purpose
落
of
实。
humanitarian corridor.
So now we're being joined by Dmytro Burtsev in Lviv, Ukraine. Hello, Dmytro. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me or not?
Hi, Dmytro. Hi. Yeah,
Hey,
now,
can you hear
now I
me?
can see you. Now I can see you now. How about you give us
Okay.
a little bit of introduction about the latest situation right now in the city that you're living in Ukraine?
Well, in the place where I live, at the west of Ukraine, it's more or less peaceful. Well, there were no alarms at night, and that's kind of make me happy. What about?
It
Yeah.
seems the ceasefire
But
it took effect. Yeah.
No, actually no. Even yesterday, while negotiation, we had 2 air alerts, so you can guess what is happening. Like while people are negotiating, Russians are still sending missiles to Ukraine. I don't think it works in a proper way, but I want to add some words about humanitarian corridors and about my view on this point. First of all, I want to mention Vice Prime Minister Irina Vereshchagin, if I remember right, because too much information for today, and like not only for today. So our Vice Prime Minister said, like in yesterday's morning speech, and I don't think you got it, but she said like something like that. Ukrainians are not willing to go through the corridors Russians create on eastern or northern direction. They don't feel safe. I think that's kind of reasonable and might be very. It's good. I don't mean good. I mean it's normal because people don't trust for Russians who came and surrounded their cities and created such a humanitarian, even not crisis. It's going to be a disaster. That's the first my point. The second point is like that. At least I got some information from Mariupol. It's not in full, but what I can understand, like from even people who are stay there, Russians failed. It was Russian side who failed, not Ukrainian one, but it was Russian side who failed the humanitarian corridors. And that words of people who stay directly in Mariupol, who was staying in Mariupol for yesterday, like 8 p.m. on Kiev time. So we see what happened. Of course, it's a kind of political games, political manipulations about humanitarian corridors, but we should understand the logic of people who stay surrounded, who still bombed. Will they go to people who bombed them? I don't think so. They won't. They don't trust for Russian side. The second one, about general humanitarian situation. In my town, it's fine. Well, I'm not in Lviv, but I'm not far from Lviv because I gave your studio the closest big location.
Sorry, I've been told that you're now in Lviv. So this somewhere very close to that?
That's fine. That's fine, but I'm pretty close to that place. Pretty close to that place because.
And I believe there are humanitarian corridor nearby, right?
Yeah, but Lviv faces another problem at the moment. Too many refugees, because usually people go to some known places, known corridors, and Lviv is one of the most well-known corridors, well-known places to leave Ukraine. They can go somewhere southern or northern and go much faster from Lviv, because even trains can't be in time because of Lviv railway station can't proceed such amount of people. And another point which is kind of interesting for me, which I noticed, that Russians, in some cities of southern, they try to provide civilians with humanitarian help. But they're trying to do that, but actually you can see the sabotage from the side of civilians. They're not killing anybody, they don't attack anybody. They're just providing the peaceful demonstrations and meetings. And another point, they're not willing to accept the humanitarian help. They don't want to accept the food Russians provide. Of course, people who are in need, who are in real need, they take it, but majority who can allow to buy something, they don't. They try to protest. They're providing protests about providing that means, and they try to show that. And you can see that directly in media, in social media. You can take, and people just protecting, taking their flags, taking their Ukrainian symbolics, well, singing Ukrainian national song, national hymn, and that's, I don't know, I don't think it's kind of strange, right? Well, people protesting, they don't want to leave Russians. They want Russians leave Ukraine. And there was some information that Russians started shooting and injured several people while this civilian protests.
Okay, there's a lot of things to say about this humanitarian corridor. We'll be talking about it later. Now let's talk to Oleg Ostrakov, who's in Moscow. Oleg.
Yes.
So I got this news about this Kremlin spokesperson yesterday told Reuters that Russia will finish the demilitarization of Ukraine and said this Ukraine must amend the constitution and reject claims to enter any bloc, must recognize Crimea as Russian and Donetsk and Lugansk as independent states. And if these conditions are met, then Russian military action will stop in a moment. That is the latest developments from the Kremlin. What do you think this statement will impact the future conflict?
Yes, I guess so. But first, let me say a few words about the humanitarian corridors. I not agree with my Ukrainian colleague because very many Ukrainians, especially that who lives in Kharkiv and Mariupol, want to evacuate to Russia. Because first, many of them have relatives on Russian territory, like me, for example. I've got my relative in Mariupol, in Nikolaev, and Poltava. So, of course, they want to leave very unsafe cities and go to Russia. And the second, that's the safest way to evacuate from these cities just to Russia. Because from Mariupol, for example, to Rostov-on-Don, it's about 1 hour by bus. And the same could be said about Kharkiv and Kiev. It's just about 100 more kilometers to Russian territory or Belarusian territory.
3 or 4.
And the third, of course, the Russian troops very much interested in evacuation people from the cities, whereas now the war, actually. So we try to avoid as many victims as possible, because who is the main obstacle to the evacuation? Mostly it's local paramilitary troops, because they use the population of these cities like human shield. And there are a lot of reports that these paramilitary troops shoot the people who try to avoid these cities.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have somebody here who's lived in there. He thinks it's about a 3-hour bus ride. Is that correct? You were saying it's a 1 hour. That does not seem factually correct. Yeah. It's either 1 or 3, but it can't be both.
Yeah.
Can you, Oleg, can you clarify your answer?
So, you mean about talks?
No, about you said it's a 1 hour bus ride to the border, and it's actually a 3-hour bus ride. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
It's about 100 kilometers, you know. So maybe 2 hours, like this.
Okay.
Just to Russian border.
So, I mean...
And if they go to southward, for example, from Kharkiv, or to the northward from Mariupol, they only way to the city, for example, Zaporozhye, would be also on fire, just in a few hours or maybe in a few days.
Okay. Well, let's assume that there are some people who are civilians who are in the crossfire, and they are not sympathetic to Russia. They're not related to somebody in Russia, and they want safety. How do you think they're going to feel about going to Russia or Belarus?
So that's why last night we offered 2 directions, for example, from Mariupol. One is to the Russia and one is to Zaporozhye. So the same about Kiev and Kharkiv and Sumy. Our militaries offers 2 directions. One to the Russian territory and one to the Ukrainian territory. So it should be the choice of the local population.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know the geography. Where is that? Is that in the west?
Zaporozhye.
Yeah.
It's
So the problem for foreigners that they don't know the geography very well.
Ukraine, central Ukraine.
It's central Ukraine, but aren't there Russian troops coming into that area? In central Ukraine, Russia has a double pincer movement going. One to cut off the Ukrainian army that is facing off against Luhansk and that area down. Okay, and then also another one where it's kind of closing in on all of the strategic military structures that are out there. The central Ukraine does not seem like it would be safe forever, if in fact the Russian objective is to quote demilitarize Ukraine.
Yes, Dmytro.
Dmytro?
Hi, Dmytro. Have you heard what Oleg just said? You want to reply to that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I know one person who was evacuated from Kharkiv to Lviv, and he said something not like that. He said like people are scared of Russians. They're not willing to come to them.
See.
Yeah, but that's not everybody. There are people who are Russian.
That's not everybody, but the common opinion is like that. I won't ask my Chinese. I don't know, but still, the people I know, everybody, they all go to West. Everybody who I know.
Yeah, but that is because you know people who are Ukrainian, who don't like Russia. How about 40% of Ukraine is Russian? And they have relatives, they have connections, they speak the language. Why would they be afraid of Russia?
Interesting question, because my friend, he is also Russian speaking, and he takes Russians as people who threaten his life and his sister's life. Russians as some kind of common notion already.
So your position is that all Russians are evil and that no one in Ukraine wants to have anything to do with them?
That's not my position. That's position of perception of Russians in Ukraine. Not all of them are like that, and well, a lot of Russians are. Well, I communicate with a lot of Russians these days, and they understand situations, and they're not associated with something common with Russian regime, with Russian political system, who are not agree with those things. But in general, even not many people in Rostov, which is close to Russian border, they're happy to take Donetsk and Lugansk refugees.
Well, why are there refugees in those areas? Is the Ukrainian army attacking them?
Well, they came to that place before war conflict has begun. That was time when actually Donetsk and Lugansk Republic said, okay, Ukraine threatening us, and they were kind of maybe they were, I don't know where they went, why did they go to that place, but that's an issue. That's really an issue, but a lot of people in Donetsk and Lugansk, they have ideological thinking. While 8 years of war.
Yeah, I think.
So, shall back to the question
People
about,
who suffered from
or maybe
Ukrainian cells.
Well, we're not speaking about that, but I mean that even in Rostov, people are not welcoming that refugees from Donetsk and Lugansk.
Why? How do you know that?
I know that because I spoke with a person from not far from Rostov.
Okay, so that's anecdotal evidence. You talked to one person and they gave you the impression that they're not welcome.
Yeah, people give
Is that
in
your
total that
friends or
that
just family, or you talk to many people about this?
Well, I ask like personal opinion and what people around them think. I don't want to judge from opinion on one person, right? That won't be objective. So the person said people are complaining on that Donetsk and Lugansk refugees.
no,
I think Dmytro is just trying to explain this.
it seems very complicated, this question.
Yeah, very complicated.
Yeah, that's a complicated question.
so-
And
so-
even
so-
refugees from Ukraine, they also won't be welcomed by Russian citizens.
Okay, well,
Because they will ask, we are paying our taxes, we are paying our fees to feed Ukrainian. That will
Well, as a
be...
Russian, I could say they are welcomed here in Russia. And about only for 2 weeks, we accepted 200 people from Lugansk and Donetsk, 200,000 people from Lugansk and Donetsk. And only in Rostov, just about 50 Russian regions accepted such refugees from the Lugansk and Donetsk.
Yeah, gentlemen, we have a
And
new.
I say, just one again, I could say, very many of them have here in Russia relatives and friends. Because the relations between Lugansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, Kharkiv are very close to Russia.
yeah, but there is that problem that our other colleague has raised, that if they're Ukrainian, they're pro-Ukrainian, they don't like the situation that Russia has put in Ukraine. They're not going to be very welcome if they show up and say, you know, we really don't like you being in our country, and I'm just here because I have nowhere else to go. And by the way, will you feed and house me? How would that be? How would that reaction be locally to that?
Actually, reaction is very friendly. Of course, some of people feel.
How many
Not
soldiers
so
have
well
died?
as
How many
before.
Russian soldiers have died so far?
Pardon?
How many Russian soldiers have died so far in this action?
You mean in Ukraine?
Correct.
For the recent information, it was about 500 people.
And you still say that everyone's going to welcome the people who killed 500 soldiers? Or support that?
But it's not peaceful, it's not civil population who killed these soldiers.
Well, they're meeting
military access.
resistance in the cities,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming that they're.
In the cities, yes, but it is between Russian troops and military and paramilitary troops.
But
Not between civil
but
population.
let's be honest here. In any kind of conflict, when it starts moving into a city, invariably, civilians are involved. They're casualties. We've seen that, and I don't mean reports of it. We've actually, seen missile strikes, whether they are errant or deliberate, we don't know. But it's very clear that civilians are dying, and that civilians are mobilizing to join in a kind of sort of civil defense. Yeah. I mean, I can't believe that Russia would be, Russian people would be welcoming people who basically say, I want to go to war with you, and if I wasn't so afraid, I would be fighting on the front lines.
Ken, if it's necessary, maybe you can just translate what Tengen is asking in Russian to Oleg to make sure that Oleg understands what Tengen is trying to.
So you think Oleg did understand what is talking, right? So
no, if necessary. I mean, if it's necessary.
I could answer.
We want to make sure that everyone can have it clearly because
if it's necessary, I'll
translate it to
translate
Russian
from English to
Russian.
Russian.
And also I've been told that we have another guest from Lviv in Ukraine, who can also be. We understand this is a very complicated question about humanitarian corridors, because both sides are accused of each other. So maybe we can just listen to more people about this. Maybe we can have a whole picture of this. Now we have Alex Danilov in Lviv, Ukraine. Hello, Alex.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Would you please just give us the introduction about this, about where you are right now, and what the situation, and are you? Because I've been told that you are planning to leave the country to other European countries. So tell us the whole process. Is there someone who's blocking you from leaving this country?
No, actually, I'm not leaving this country because we have a war situation due to our relative country, like my previous speaker told. But our guys, men, are not liable for leaving because we have to be mobilized if our country will need our help. Regarding to the words that this guy from Moscow told, I don't understand where did he get this information. Seems he just retranslating the information that he watched on TV, because I am the native Ukrainian and I can speak like your guys told from my heart, that we are not dreaming about joining the Russia at all, because we have the good life here. We have the cities that were built before your coming, and we had buildings that were not destroyed, and that is the friendship that we don't want to get in future, because some people, of course, have relatives, have friends in Russia. The same I do. I have family also here, there in Russia, but I have no any dreams to join Russia, because I, like many other people from our country, do not support the political situation, and we prefer to live in our area and live in our military, or not military, but political organization, and not dictatorship, and more democratic than Russia has. And we have the ability to speak anything we want, but not to go to the prison by doing some posts in socials. Also, as you can understand, not everyone in our cities welcome Russian troops, military troops, because you can see on the image the situation with our living, with our houses after Russia came. This aviation bombing, our children are in underground, and that is not the best way to be friends, and not the best way to ask someone to join them. If you would be better in your own country,
understand, Alex. I want to focus on this evacuation question. So after Ukrainian evacuate to other countries like Poland or Romania, does the embassy of Ukraine in those countries to provide any kind of the helps to those people?
Yes, it's
what kind of the help that they can provide?
For example, my family now is living in Poland. My wife and my daughter, and they have a great support from Poland. They get the free living apartments, they get free food, they get free medicine, even children and our...
So those, the apartment or the supplies are provided by the Ukraine embassy or are provided by Poland government?
No, only by Poland, but probably with communication with our embassies, but totally support of financial living by Poland.
I want to ask Alex,
and other countries
if I could, I'd like to ask you a question. I mean, for many people who are outside Ukraine and Russia, this seems to be a geopolitical match between the U.S., Europe, and basically NATO on one side and the Russians on the other side. And I think it's tragic that Ukrainians are dying because of this geopolitical links. What is the U.S. and what is Europe doing for this refugee crisis? And do you blame them for putting you guys in the middle?
No, we are just living in this middle, so that is not our choice where to born. Such situation came not just because of NATO or something else. This is a regular stuff between two opposite parties. And we have to live inside this conflict and have to join some part of this conflict. Because,
please explain to me. Why is this just a fight between Russia and Ukraine? What is it about that what Ukraine has done that threatens Russia?
I understand. Yeah. Because Russia in own propaganda channels always tells everyone, like this guy in our dialogue, that Ukraine is the danger for the territory of Ukraine is a danger for their own country. So they try to prevent this danger, not inspire that any danger didn't came from Ukraine. We are a very peaceful country, peaceful people, and any one of us didn't never think about.
But Alex, it seems it seems very hard to believe that the Russians have put the expense, time, and are going to suffer really a tremendous amount of economic and political damage simply because they have a vague feeling that Ukraine is not a good country. That doesn't make sense. That is not a strategic thing. I can dislike somebody without going to war with them. So what is it? What is at the center of this, for you, in your opinion?
What is in the center? I think the center is the regular dream of mad old people who govern the country to join the previously breaked area that was called USSR with total military, how it goes.
So you're saying that it's Putin's desire to reassemble the USSR, which is at the center of this?
Seems so.
You really think that's even remotely possible, given that 5 nations have already joined NATO and that more will probably apply? Why would Ukraine justify that kind of action? I mean, taking Ukraine will not change the situation on other borders or with other countries.
Why?
So it doesn't seem to add up. I know you can believe that he wants to do that. He's talked in the past about, his pride in the USSR, but it doesn't make sense. And you can say he's mad, but he's been planning this for a long period of time, and it seems very, very methodical.
Yes, of course, but these kind of decisions are not related to some political or some economical or something else. Because the power of country can be proved or something else with their small congruent wars that can be held with someone who is more weak and someone who is smaller, to establish and join the people inside the country to hold their powers and political forces in their own hands.
So you would say there's no validity to the Russian fear of having missiles in Ukraine, which would be somewhere between 6 and 8 minutes, and that's conventional. If you use supersonic, hypersonic, it would even be quicker. Literally no reaction time. I mean, the U.S. We said absolutely no during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that would have taken longer. All right, this literally is 6 to 8 minutes, which means you have no time to react. You're saying that should not be a concern to somebody like Russia?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question well.
Okay, so is there a legitimate concern by Russia about having Ukraine join NATO and have missiles, nuclear and conventional, that could hit Moscow in 6 to 8 minutes, assuming you're using conventional? If you use hypersonic, we could literally be talking about, a minute and a half. So if the situation was reversed, would you think that that was an issue? Now, remember, from the U.S. point of view,
Cuban crisis.
when the Russians were about to put missiles in Cuba, which is much further from Washington, D.C., we made this into a nuclear issue. So why wouldn't they feel threatened by having NATO that close to their doorstep?
Maybe they could feel in this way, but that is not the way to demonstrate their military powers, because it will be better to make by political way and to regarding to the big amount of relatives and friends in our closely situated placed countries. They could make another way of involving Ukraine in their political field, also by attractive economical and political situation inside Russia itself. But they didn't do it, and only the military forces can help, and that only push out Ukrainian people from willing to join Russia. Yes, Russia can be frightened. I don't know how to tell it better. To feel the
question to
danger.
Another Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we have another. Dmitro, would you like to reply to Mr. Tengin's question about this? Because we know it's so hard to let the Ukrainian to accept this the stance that. To ask those Ukrainians to stand on the perspective of a Russian. But would you like to reply what Tengen, did you hear what the conversation between Tengen? Yeah, go ahead.
I was listening very attentive to this conversation, and I want first, Ukraine has been at the, crossroads, geopolitical crossroads. Well, from the very early times, we can hold and hoard, First World War, Second World War, all the geopolitical interests from Europe goes to Asia through Ukraine and vice versa. That's the first one. The second one about American missiles in Ukraine. Well, as for me, it sounds a bit unreal until Ukraine enters NATO. It's absolutely unreal. That's the first one. And the second one, NATO state.
But doesn't your constitution say that you're going to enter NATO?
Mr. Tan, may I finish this first?
Okay.
And then you can reply.
Yeah.
Yes, our constitution said that we are going to NATO. But it's one big but. NATO didn't say when they're gonna take us to this alliance, right? And it was even a Munich speech of Zelensky.
But there are intentions.
And Munich speech of Zelensky, he said directly, he needs the guarantees of security as far as he understands that NATO is not going to take Ukraine.
I understand, but what you're saying, it sounds like, since it's in your constitution, you're saying that Russia should wait on any military action until Ukraine is in NATO, at which point there would be a fight between NATO and Russia. That's the logic, correct?
No, that's a bit incorrect logic. NATO, well, about NATO, Ukrainian perspective of coming to NATO, it might take from 10 to 15 years. It could take from that period of time. So 15 years, a lot of things might change within this 15 years, right? That's the first point.
Well, I don't know if it's in your constitution. Unless you change your constitution, nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
And as Zelensky said, we are open to negotiate the same Munich speech. The same Munich speech. Ukraine is ready to negotiate, but we need the guarantees of security.
Okay. So I want to go back to another Munich speech, security conference speech, and that was in 2007. And in 2007, Putin got up at that meeting, I think it was about less than 30 minutes. He gave a speech where he said, Russia has been humiliated, lied to, and that he no longer would uphold, he would work against the world order as led by the United States and cooperated with Europe. Because he said, the expansion of NATO and the EU into these previous Soviet bloc countries, after assurances had been given on the floor of the Duma by the Secretary of State of the United States that that wouldn't happen. Now, I'm going to put aside this issue, why the U.S. would have the right to make promises on behalf of sovereign nations. But you can understand from the Russian point of view, they feel that they were betrayed, humiliated. Okay, so the fuse that we're talking about, Alex was referring to like this came out of nowhere and the Russians suddenly attacked. But the fact is, 15 years ago, Putin said he was going to do this. And since that time, we've had issues. Russia has pushed back in South Ossetia, in Georgia, all these places. Right? They have done it. So this isn't coming out of the blue. This is a situation which I said to you earlier, it seems to me this is a geopolitical situation, a contest between mainly led by the United States against Russia, and Ukraine is paying the price. How do you feel about that?
We have somebody else joining, but well, it should be negotiated. A lot of things could be negotiated, but as far as I can understand, something.
Yeah, but let's be clear. Putin has put troops on the ground. He's committed. The sanctions are in place. There's very little left that can be done. Maybe he stops oil and gas, and they press the nuclear option and say that there's going to be no SWIFT payments whatsoever for anything Russian. All right. So he's fully committed at this point. Do you believe that negotiations can take place until he feels he's gotten the maximum advantage that he can get on the battlefield before he's going to go to negotiations? Do you think that's a correct statement?
Well, it's the battlefield now works not for favor of Russians, at least for the moment.
Okay.
The only problem.
But then you get back to humanitarian. Are these civilians being used as human shields? Are they part of a PR campaign by the Ukrainian government to basically drive up the sympathy factor by having dead civilians and children in the streets?
At least from situation we have and we know, the only fact we have, civilians are not allowed to go in and go out. The lack of supplies. That's the only situation we know clearly.
So we're heading towards a tragedy.
Yeah, we have a tragedy. We have a humanitarian crisis at the moment. But well, I can even text now for one person whose person is in Mariupol, who is not able to communicate with his parents for very long, and. Yeah, I can just text him now. I'm not sure if he can reply me or not, but as far as I know, he doesn't have contact with his parents for how many, 2 or 3 days, or even 4.
Oh, Dmitry, I want to get back to this to the Beijing. Shui, you want to jump into what Tangen just said about this, the little history of this conflict, because we have been reaching out to a little bit of background of this, of what makes this conflicts happen, because both sides have their own stories on this. What's your take on this, the conflict, the reasons behind this conflict?
Yeah, the situation is pretty complicated, and now I think the negotiations come to a deadlock situation, because both sides, from Russia's perspective and from Ukraine perspective, they propose the conditions which is not acceptable for both sides. So that's why we haven't seen any concrete or solid results from the past 3 rounds of talks, and even the 4th round of talks is coming soon. But we don't see any hope for this issue because of the legitimate security concern were not respected. And you see, just as Mr. Tongan has said, just 60 years ago, what the U.S. reaction to the Cuban Missile Crisis was pretty huge, and the U.S. won't let any foreign powers to put their missiles so close and to give kind of a security threat to that nation. But now you see the Russians' reaction to U.S. And especially the U.S.-led NATO. So you see the legitimate security concerns were not respected. So that's why we are probably not going to see very positive results in the coming days. Yeah.
Is it possible that I can ask Oleg the same question? Is this a contest between Russia and the U.S. and Ukraine is paying the price?
In some extent.
Yeah.
To some extent. It can be taken as a Russian.
I think that was the question for Oleg, right?
Yeah.
He said it was okay.
Yeah.
It can be taken as a.
But I'd also like to
in some extent. But what I want to say.
Dimitrov, that was a question for Oleg. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, this is for Oleg.
Yeah.
Hello, Oleg. You still with us? Yeah. Mr. Tengen, would you please repeat your question? For,
Oleg, what I wanted to know is, isn't this really a contest between Russia and the United States? NATO's in the middle of it, yes, but actually it's Ukraine who's paying the price.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You can't hear him.
The
The lips are moving, but there is no sound.
Oleg, you have to unmute yourself. You have to set up again your microphone. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can. We can hear you now.
Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
of course, the conflict not between Russia and Ukraine, the strategic conflict between Russia and the United States. And just 3 months ago, Russian side asked demand from United States and NATO countries. Just 3 simple things. First, Ukraine should be neutral and democratic countries. There should be no military relationship between Ukraine and NATO, and of course between Ukraine and United States. Before you say, well, it's not very possible that United States could deploy their missiles against Russia on the Ukrainian territory. Well, maybe it's true, but Ukraine has all the competitions to build its own missiles. For example, cruise missiles or even strategic missiles, we know. Because even by now, Ukraine has tested some cruise missiles. So it's very possible that United States could use the Ukrainian-built missiles against Russia. It's very possible. So in such kind of situation, Ukraine even couldn't be a member of NATO, but it could be used against Russia by NATO. So that's the first. The second, we try to make United States retreat from the eastern territories near Russian border, just by the situation of 1997. It's also very simple demand. So if United States and NATO states could accept such kind of demands, there will be no military conflict now in Ukrainian territory. And the second, Russia demand for full implementation of Minsk agreement. For 8 years, Lugansk and Donetsk has been shot and shelled by Ukrainian side. Every day, a few people died from Ukrainian sharing. So that was the second demand of the Russian side. Not use Donetsk and Lugansk as tool against Russia. So, of course, Ukraine is a sort of victim of such kind of strategic situation. But it also has its own fault, because the Russian troops who shelled peaceful Lugansk and Donetsk. And we know now, just about 5 kilometers from Donetsk, deployed very powerful military forces of Ukraine, maybe the most powerful on the Ukrainian territory.
Oleg, I have a hypothetical question, and I know you don't speak for Russia or Putin, but it would be, it says, you said everything is very simple. In theory it is, but in practice, no. Getting 5 countries to give up their membership to NATO, I don't know if that would happen. But would it be possible if, in fact, the existing non-NATO previous Soviet countries would declare themselves all neutral? Because I don't think this is just about Ukraine. It seems to be about a much larger issue, and that is maintaining the neutrality of the previous Soviet pact states. So if they say that they won't become part of NATO, and let me finish, and the ones that are existing in NATO say we will remove our weapons, our offensive weapons, okay, from the territory, and then if Russia and NATO would both guarantee that, and the US on top of that, would that be an acceptable, possible way of going at this?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
So I believe that, of course, there couldn't be achieved 100% neutrality, but at least military neutrality, it could be achieved.
And how about EU? Would that be allowed to continue?
It's discussable.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, that was getting back to the question of what could be the possible solution for this, because as we talked about, as we talked before, well, I think the common ground is getting smaller and smaller, and they don't agree with each other. They have their very
yeah, but as we've talked about, this is a geopolitical struggle between the U.S. and the USSR,
Western Russia.
Yeah,
right.
Ukraine is suffering, and the tragedy is going to increase. The issue is, when do you get to the table? Do you get to the table on top of a pile of body bags, both Ukrainian and Russian? Or is there a sane way, an off-ramp, that Western and Eastern countries, because what Oleg agreed was possible, would save face for both sides. The U.S. says we haven't given in, we're just simply maintaining the peace. Russia has now guaranteed the situation, the military situation. We're guaranteeing it. It will remain neutral. The idea behind NATO is a defensive alliance. So if this solves the defensive issue, then it could be possible. And for the Russian side, they can say, look, we now have a neutral corridor around us, and we have not been humiliated and walked over. So it would seem that there is a possibility. The question is, do we need a bunch of bodies before we get to that point when there actually is solid negotiations?
So, Mr. Tinkanen, is that the new neutral corridor, as you mentioned about? Is that the same things to what we talked yesterday about this non-NATO model?
Non-NATO model.
Maybe that's
It's not a non-NATO model. Basically, it's just saying that these areas will remain, will not take military action either for or against Russia or NATO.
So you mean the whole Ukraine or the several regions in?
Not all of the previous Soviet pact USSR states outside of Russia would agree that they're not going to join any kind of pact, defensive alliance against Russia or anybody else. Basically, they take out their military options, but
so not,
Russia
not
guarantees
only European, not only Ukraine.
Not only Ukraine, it would have to be almost all of them, because it's not just Ukraine that is the issue. Remember, there was the incidences in Georgia and things like that. You have to, there's got to be a way that we can peacefully disarm everybody, prevent needless deaths.
But I think it's late already. For example, the Baltic countries.
The Baltic countries, the three of
No,
them are already.
No, they're all in. But if you say to them, look, Russia will guarantee your safety, we will guarantee your safety, but you take out all offensive missiles, all right? You take out anything that could be construed, that could be attacked. Now, the truth is, if it does come to war, if it's involving NATO, it's probably going to go nuclear. If there's a mad rush by the Russian army to just take over these things, A, they've broken the treaty, B, it probably does go nuclear. You don't need conventional forces. You don't need troops staring eyeball to eyeball with guns in their hands, waiting for the other guy to make a mistake.
But I have a question now. I would like ask the interpreter help me. 突然我有一个想法啊，就是如果这个乌克兰做出让步，承认了就是答应保持中立地位，
by maintaining
然后呢和俄
neutral
方呢签署
states
相关的
and
协
also
定。
signing the
如果美
agreement
国和北约
with all related parties. But the United States and NATO say no.
Yeah,
What they should do.
Ken just said if Ukraine agree to be a neutral, and then what we can do if U.S. and NATO say no about this.
Well, that would be very, very difficult for them to actually say no. And quite frankly, Europe would side with Ukraine. Europe does not want a war. It does not want to lose 40% of its energy. It doesn't want to be stuck trying to find food.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
The interests of Europe are not having a battlefield on their borders.
Yes, I know it's
very different from the U.S.
The benefit for Europe, but the United States has a domination position in NATO.
Yeah, I think now it's a deadlock situation, not only for the parties within Ukraine, but also like for Ukraine side, for Russia, and for NATO, for European Union, and for the US. Because if NATO gave in these kind of conditions, that will alarm their alliance that NATO cannot deliver their security commitment. And for
it's a bad signal
a
for the
bad,
allies.
It's a bad signal. So
was Afghanistan, and so was Iraq. Those are bad signals too. At least this one would lead to some sort of peace.
So that's why before the conflict erupted, and all the NATO members they are sending their troops to Romania, to other parts to show their capacity, and they can deliver the security promise to all its islands alliances. So if NATO giving these kind of conditions in the peace talks in Ukraine, so it will be pretty hard. So I think the future, sadly,
that leads to another
US and the NATO will never give up.
Yeah, they won't give up.
Gentlemen, where else are we going? Tell me how this can be done in a way that saves face for both sides. Now, I know it'll be difficult to get the 5 countries who have joined NATO.
Yep.
But these are countries. When you say to them, it says, "Look, do you want war? All right,
no,
and none of them. The reason they joined exactly, and this is like World War I. Everyone was trying to avoid war, and what happened? It broke out.
Yeah.
And so, at least learn and pay attention to the lessons of history. This is perhaps a different way of giving Putin what he wants, getting what Europe wants, and this is really not the U.S.'s concern. Once Europe, all right, remember, this was to protect Europe.
Yeah.
The U.S. is not on the border of Russia, except Alaska. But this was to protect Europe. So if it protects Europe, all right, how is the U.S. going to say, no, we don't care about Europe? We don't care about your energy. We don't care about your food.
Yeah.
We're hoping you'll buy your energy from us and your food from us, and it's good for us.
Yeah.
America first, right? No, that's not going to fly. Yeah. And I think there's a very strong feeling in Europe that this thing has to be handled.
That leads to another question that where this conflict is going, where this conflict is heading, and what the Ukraine could become in the future. Like, is Ukraine is going to become, because it's so complicated to solve this conflict, that nobody don't want to step back. and everybody just to stand very firmly on their stance. So, and as Mr. Tangen mentioned, Ukraine is the one who's been sacrificed. So, what this country is going to become? Is this going to become the second Georgia? It's going to be
maybe
Finland.
Second Finland.
Finland, yeah.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, what's your point? What is the future of Ukraine?
Okay. Right now, if it's a military solution, if Russia is successful, it will take a large swath. It will it'll create a smaller West Ukraine and a larger East Ukraine. It looks very clearly that they're trying to deny access to the Baltic, that they want to have the land bridge to the Crimea, and they want to take at least everything to the Dnieper River. That leaves the question of what happens to the rest. Militarily, if they can conquer it, then the question becomes, can you hold it? Because it's one thing, as we've learned in the United States, we can roll over anybody, but we can't hold it, right? And the amount of money and time, effort, bodies that it takes to occupy a country against its will is a long-term cost. And the other part of this is Russia has something to lose. At this juncture, all the questions about NATO, at least on the Western side, are over. NATO has now become de facto. You're going to see every nation putting their 4% into it. And you're going to see more countries trying to join it. So I think there is a very strong argument that Russia doesn't want a strong NATO, doesn't want an opposing force on it. This may be an off-ramp.
So if let's look at a reality. So how do you think there is respective about the negotiations?
Ken, you can say Mandarin. I want to hear your take on the future of Ukraine.
And future, I don't know what will happen. 实际这个
This is so complicated situation. Actually, it's really hard to see or predict the future, and also depends on so many changing issues, both sides. So that still depend on their interaction between both sides. So for myself, we should focus on the upcoming peace talks, whether any peace talk can produce any progress, because still a lot of people not really stay positive on the result of the fourth round of peace talk. So I really would like to know that the people in Ukraine and in Moscow to know exactly peace talk can work to resolve the issue. Maybe also the question to Mr. Tangen as well.
Yeah, we were talking about a peace talk.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the currently.
It will work. The fourth round. The fourth round.
It's not going to be the fourth.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, there's no unless somebody comes forward with something that's acceptable to all sides.
Yeah.
Right. There's the only thing that Russia has to do is to try to win on the battlefield and then try to negotiate from, quote, a position of strength. But that position of strength will be a Pyrrhic victory, because now they have an entrenched NATO that's going to be well-funded with more nations, more previous Soviet bloc nations also joining. So all you're doing is recreating the Cold War. It's going to, the economic damage to Russia over the long term is going to be, it could be catastrophic. They have the essentials. They have food, they have energy, but it's not going to be a very nice place to live, because you're not going to have a lot of choices above that.
So and the situation is maybe very pathetic, and the military operation will possibly become the last choice. And after a pure victory for one side, then they will have
there's no victory.
No victory actually, because number one is that the dialogue. Both sides cannot give in their demands, and the second part is both Moscow and Kiev are still cannot fully fulfill their demands. Like for Russia, they want the demilitarization of Ukraine, but now you see Ukraine is receiving more weapons, and it's pretty hard for Russia to fully demilitarize Ukraine right now. And for Ukraine, their territorial sovereignty and that is their bottom line, and they cannot give in that part, and also the amendments of the constitution. So that is also acceptable. So given that situation, so it is very sad, and I think the situation could be worse. And
And Alex, Dimitro, and Oleg, we want to hear from you about your views on the peace talk. There are 3 rounds of peace talk, but no solid progress has been made, except for the humanitarian corridor and short ceasefires. But the core interest has not been touched, has not been reached out. So do you believe this, Ukraine and Russia can work out something on a negotiating table? Are you hopeful for the 4th round of negotiation?
Well,
yeah, Dimitro.
Please, Mr. Oleg, please speak. I'll continue after you.
Okay.
Okay.
He has to turn his mic on.
Of peaceful talks between Russia and Ukraine now. Because I don't think that even some agreement could be reached during these talks. It could be implemented by Ukrainian side. For example, yesterday, after the negotiation was end, the head of Ukrainian delegation said, I wouldn't like to pronounce the what we reached during our talks because it would be broken by some third side. I don't know what did he mean by this, but I could understand that even 2 sides reached some agreement during the talks. Somebody in Kyiv or maybe somewhere else, maybe in Washington or Brussels, could make some obstacles to implement such kind of agreements.
Oh, Alex, so you mean Mr. Zelensky doesn't control the situation in Ukraine?
I guess so.
Oh.
Because there are many very information that the local paramilitary and even military and local authorities don't listen to President Zelensky.
Where?
In Ukraine.
Well, can you name anybody? Can you name anybody like trustful for this information?
Yeah. What is the source of this?
Any source? Yes.
What was the source of this?
Any source which can be trusted.
Yeah.
A lot of well, yeah. I just said about the head of Ukrainian delegation. He said like this. He was afraid that if he declared the what they reached during the talk, somebody could be against it, contra it.
You can understand. Actually, you know that the people who go to negotiations have their own competition, and they don't decide the core reason.
It was. Pardon, I just want to go on. You know, before, during the last 3 rounds of the talks, it would be the agreement about the human agreement. Sorry, I don't know who is speaking now.
Nobody's talking. Nobody's talking. Go ahead, Oleg. Nobody's talking.
Unfortunately, 20. No, we have. It's important. No.
Oh.
The Martia.
May I speak first? Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, about negotiations. Well, it was as previous speaker said. There were negotiations and some decisions about humanitarian corridors, but as we can see, something went wrong. We don't know, is it Ukrainian side or Russian side? Somebody said it's Russian, somebody said it's Ukrainian, but still it's stuck. That's the first one. The second one, the people who go to negotiations, they don't have a competition to decide. The president at the moment is the person who decides, and his people who are around him are deciding and give him some advices what to do. So that's the first one. The second one, well, there were some insights, and I won't share them with you. It's journalist Krista Groziev. I don't know if you heard about him, but he is not Ukrainian. So actually he raised out some, talks on the backyard of negotiations and the real conditions which are rising by Russians. That's the first one, as you said, like kind of, that the first one. The most important, Zelensky gonna still the president, but the prime minister gonna be Boyko. Boyko is a person who is pro-Russian. So the Russians tell who should be president, who should be prime minister.
Excuse me, Dmitry, what is the source of your information? How can you sure about that Boyko will be the prime minister?
No. It was inside from journalist Krista Groziev.
And who's that journalist?
Who do they work for?
Yeah, which agency?
Which media outlets has this the journalist you mentioned about work for? Which media outlets?
That's a Bulgarian journalist.
Bulgarian.
Yeah, that's a Bulgarian journalist.
Really? So
we had some insights from Ukraine.
If it's will be true, it's a big news. So I don't sure about that.
Yeah.
That's a leak. Can be a leak, so it can be not true, but it's some info, which leaks and might be taken into consideration. That Russians write that condition.
And look, leaked unnamed sources by third parties who are not part of the negotiation. Very hard to say. If your source said that they got it from a Russian high level and they are credible, that would be one thing. But
everyone.
This is. We don't want to get into this disinformation.
Everyone just to make clear your source before you trying to make some more statements or give us more information. Now we've been joined by another stringer of CGTN's Matteo Sorbi. He's in Kharkiv. Hello, Martia.
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Marty.
Good morning.
Marty,
it's
we're
a
getting
morning
half
in
your
Kharkiv.
Face. It's kind of like a.
So the passport check once again.
There. So this morning, Kharkov woke up with a sense of calm, and after heavy shellings in the night, the city is a ghost town as usual, and I want to say for the people watching that actually the Russian shellings exactly got the point, the result. Actually, they want that everybody from
the connection's not good.
Yeah, not good.
Oh.
Leave.
Can we fix that? Our team
where there is no food.
So are you in the downtown right now?
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, it's getting better.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I am.
You're still in the downtown of Kharkiv.
I am in the same place of yesterday because it seems to me the safest one, despite the fact that has been shelled completely. So I guess this is not anymore a strategic point. You can see behind me people helping me, very good volunteer. They provide for anything that people needs.
Is it volunteer?
Volunteers, the Ukraine volunteers?
Yeah, so Marty, would you please...
Yeah, Ukraine volunteers.
Yeah, would you please turn your camera to the other side? Yeah.
Maybe you can show us around. Show us around. Use your phone.
Yeah.
Show us what's...
Yeah.
Is that a residential area? Residential area or commercial area?
So they help each other very well, and you can see with a fuel problem, they help each other. They are volunteer, and this is exactly the place that it's very significant because it's in downtown.
So what is the local temperature right now?
To know.
It's minus
the local temperature is not too. Yeah, it's -3.
Oh, -3.
It's not too bad. Like yesterday, when we report in the evening, usually yesterday was already -8, and then it stays around -5.
Oh.
Martia?
We think to have during the weekend -15. So I want to tell you something about the price of the gasoline and the situation and the economic situation in Kharkiv and in Ukraine in general. Actually, of course, the price of the gas soared, but there is a stability in the local currency, in the hryvnia, because of course Americans are floating with cash flow the national Ukrainian bank. So the inflation, frankly speaking, is not too high. And the problem in Kharkiv is really how to get the food. And I hope in the next future, in the next weeks, we can have some water. But so far, the water is not problematic. We can get water from our apartments, from everywhere there is water. But we think that in the next weeks, the battle for Kharkiv will be very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So
Martia, we have some more comments from the Facebook page. Our users have left this messages to ask you how is the evacuation of civilians progressing, and how are the food supplies in Kharkiv, and where are they coming from?
Yeah. It's a very good question. Every night we have a train from Kharkiv Central with evacuating the refugees. They usually go away around 50,000 people every day. They leave from Kharkiv to Kyiv, and from Kyiv, many of them go to Poland, and some of them go to Germany, to Denmark, in many other countries of Western Europe. So from Kharkiv, I can report you for sure 50,000 civilians leave Kharkiv every day, and there is one special train that goes every night from Kharkiv to Kyiv. About food supply, it's a big problem. All the supermarkets and the mini markets are closed, but one supermarket is open. It's a Spar, S-P-A-R. It's a Spar. People basically are preparing for the worst. People are preparing for the worst. I don't want to exaggerate. After the heavy shelling of last Monday, Kharkiv is relatively calm. But in the next weeks, maybe can be destroyed if they don't find the way for accepting this humanitarian corridor. Of course, the heavy shellings in the city will go on next week.
Okay, Martia, we've been told there is a very short ceasefire right now. Is the ceasefire is ongoing, or can you still hear the shelling?
Yes, I confirm there is a short ceasefire because there is a weak sense of optimism that Kharkiv can be safe. Actually, Mariupol is the center of a heavy war, as you guys know, and Kyiv. For sure, the next weeks we will see heavy shellings in Kyiv and in Mariupol. Nobody knows about Kharkiv, and frankly, I am appreciating one day of calm and ceasefire. I confirm that.
So the ceasefire will only last for 1 day, for 24 hours?
Yeah, for now it's confirmed for 1-2 days maximum, but maybe because basically, let's be completely clear. Kharkiv is resisting, military speaking, in the outskirts of Kharkiv. There is the Russian. The city of Kharkiv is already empty. Kharkiv is under the control of the Ukrainian army without civilian. It's already a ghost town. So technically, it's controlled by the Ukrainian, but there is no civil life in Kharkiv. You can say that the economy war of Kharkiv is already lost by the Ukrainian. But of course, the most important military war is under the control of the Ukrainian. The ceasefire is going to last 1 day, maximum 2 days, because nobody knows if they find a compromise to save the city. The question is not if the Ukrainian can win the war in Kharkiv, is how long they want to fight to save Kharkiv.
So, Marty, I have a question about the refugees. You said the people move on through the Poland to Germany, to Denmark, and to the Western Europe. So why they don't move to the Baltic countries such as Lithuania or Estonia or
Estonia?
Yeah, maybe Lithuania.
Yes. Why they don't go in the Baltic country?
Yeah.
Well, some of them, they do go to Lithuania, to Vilnius, to Riga, to Tallinn in the Baltics. But it seems to me that it's clear that, and is nothing wrong with that. It's justified the fact that many refugees are looking for good refugees program. And so far, the best refugees program has been set in Denmark and in Germany. Swiss is doing very well, and France is also providing a very good refugees program. Of course, the Baltics, the Italians can provide, the Portuguese, the Greece, they can provide less money for the refugees. And I've been told that in Sweden and especially Copenhagen, in Denmark, there is a very good program for refugees.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right, Marty, when the ceasefire is over and when the shelling is
will they come back?
Where can you go? And is that okay for you to leave this country as soon as possible?
Leave the city.
My duty, yes. If the ceasefire will break up, will be over, I will try to report as soon as I can from the ghost town of Kharkiv and to report the fight for Kharkiv. But if we reach the point where will be no water, will be no food at all, I'm sure I can get a train or a car to get out of the country. I will find a solution. Thanks for asking.
So the trains to Kiev is still normal. Every night there will be a train from Kharkiv to Kiev, right? I remember you just said that.
So far, exactly. So far, I confirm that the situation is relatively calm and acceptable. The heavy shellings is in the night, and no more on the city of Kharkov, because 1 week of heavy shelling already destroyed a lot, and we have a population that dropped down from 1.5 million around to 500,000. So the goal of the Russian is already achieved in Kharkov. They need just to decide how to conquest Kharkiv, and frankly speaking, I'm a bit pessimistic because the Ukrainian army is fighting in a very brave way. The Ukrainian army is defending under a military point of view, a strategic point of view, Kharkiv in an excellent way. They just captured, they just took one Russian pilot yesterday. The war is a lot about Stinger's weapons, which means that the Ukrainians are using very sophisticated weapons by land to destroy the aircrafts and helicopters. This strategy is working very well, and that's why I think the next days to come will be terrible for Kharkiv, because the only way for the Russian to answer will be heavy shellings, more and more. So what I'm saying is that for now, there is one night train. I think the Russians have no intention to destroy the train station and the way to escape, but of course will be more and more difficult to report from here.
All right,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you, Martia.
This is the situation, frankly speaking, if I can add this is the situation that we are facing in Kyiv and Mariupol. The Ukrainian army is fighting in a very brave way, and they have a lot of heroes, frankly speaking. But it's not possible to compare the force, the power of the Russian army with the Ukrainian army, especially since when Poland denied to the United States the use of aircraft. So I don't know how long this is going to last, but it seems to me that it can last for a while.
Okay, this network is on and off.
Even and not live in the city. Yeah, it's very hard for the Russian to enter in the cities because the Ukrainians are using very well the anti-tanks weapons. So this is the bottom line. The Russians are winning the war by numbers, but they cannot enter and conquest all the cities. After almost 2 weeks of war, we have only Kherson completely conquested. Let's remind for the people watching that Mariupol, but the fight is still going on, like in Kharkiv, like in Kyiv, and this is the bottom line I like to underline. It's very hard to win the war and control the cities. This is the bottom line.
Okay, Mattia, do you see any other foreign reporters in Kharkiv right now? How many of them are right now reporting in Kharkiv?
This is a very good question.
And also, before you answer the question, I want to remind every one of our guests and the stringers in this chat room, just feel free to ask the question if you have any. This is not a one-on-one conversation, okay? So go ahead, Mattia.
Yeah. Yes, no, thank you for the question about other journalists. I have been trying to reach out other journalists. So this is the situation. Last week, under heavy shellings, the Washington Post, the BBC, and the CNN made an outstanding job. And of course, other German and French colleagues. It seems to me that I am almost alone in the city now because they need to move in other city. And I think now we are 3, 4 Western journalists. There is no Russian journalist for sure. For sure, there is no Russian coverage. The Russian journalists are only in Donetsk and Lugansk, in Donbass. In Kharkov, I am the only Italian journalist, and maybe there are a few more journalists, but they all left a few days ago, and I think they will come back in the next days to report the fight for Kharkov.
Some points about Kherson, if I can.
Please.
As I have the information, the city is nominally conquered by Russian forces.
We lost him?
Yeah, we lost him.
We can't hear you. Alex. Alex, you have to set up again. Set up again and repeat your question. We didn't hear you.
It's not a question. It's not a question. It's just a small point about Kherson. As our colleague had announced that this city is conquered by Russian forces, but that is just nominally because our military guys are still there and resistance still going on. So everyone believes that the situation will change soon as we are more powerful and more experienced in the fields, and I believe that Kherson will come back soon to the political field of Ukraine due to our guys that are weaponed. Yep.
Alexander, thank you for your question. I think you just made a very strong point, and you show up a scenario. Definitely the Ukrainian force are controlling Kharkov. I reported that. Nobody knows if it's possible to control soon or later again the normal life of Kharkov. Nobody knows.
We're not talking about the normal life. War is not normal life at all.
No, Alexander, let's be clear. Nobody knows if the Ukrainian can resist. You have to admit that the Ukrainians are resisting very well. You guys are more experienced on the ground, but Kharkov is completely surrounded by Russian force. So I have the duty to report that the Ukrainian army is controlling in a very good and brave way the city of Kharkov, which is completely shelled and surrounded by Russian force, and nobody knows if soon or later the Ukrainian army can resist. Maybe
no one knows, but I was talking about Kherson that is already occupied by Russian forces, but these forces are still on the ground where our people are more strong. And that I just admitted that I firmly believe that these forces will be defeated by our military guys in future. That's only my point and only my dream.
Alexander, is very respectful dream, and I wish you that for sure. Dimitro, tell me everything.
I have a question to you, Mattia. You know, Russians used to be a second war power in the world. But if you can see Ukraine faces this second power, don't you think Ukraine can be counted as a 1.5?
Absolutely, Dimitro. Absolutely, Dimitro. It's a great point of view. It's a great question.
You know, I'm going to interrupt here. I think this chest beating is not the point. The fact is the 80,000 Taliban defeated the U.S. It doesn't necessarily mean it. It points to the fact that you can have superior forces take the country. But the question is, can they hold it and at what cost? Right. But I don't think it's useful for people to be beating their chest about who's going to take who or at what level these different armies are. This is a tragedy going on. I don't know why this would be something that you want to start beating your chest about.
No, it's not just beating, but, well, the level Russians show that they can't even take no big city, especially as the north.
Listen, let's be clear about this. If they wanted to use absolute tactics, they could be bombing these cities into the Stone Age, literally. They haven't done that.
The bombing of military.
Yes. But don't. It is not useful at this point. We're trying to find a path away from war, not trying to encourage people to think that they can win it, either the Russian side or the Ukrainian. The issue is it has to be solved through diplomacy, through negotiation. So I find this a little bit tough when people start saying, oh, we're going to win, oh no, we're going to win. That stuff is for the school ground. There are women and children who are being killed.
It's not so important.
That's important, but I want to say one thing. What happens on the ground now, like around Kharkiv, around Kyiv and the south of Ukraine, it also decides what's going to happen on the table of negotiations. That will decide very much.
Yeah, but what you're saying is that you're willing to sacrifice civilians in order to get a political point.
I'm not speaking about sacrifice. I'm not speaking about sacrificing civilians. I'm speaking about that what happens on the ground will have a definite influence on what will happen around the table of negotiations.
Yes.
I mean that.
Dimitro, I got your question. I want to answer, and I think if I can say something, both of you guys are right. Our senior analyst, I think, is totally right with his opinion to say that technically the Russian can simply destroy everything. But I got your point, Dimitro. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true that nobody could expect these resistance. And even the Kremlin, that's for sure, even the Kremlin didn't expect not to win Ukraine in 1 week. This is the bottom line, I think, of your question and our beautiful exchange of views, because the Russian project to finish and to win the war for Ukraine maximum in 1 week, maybe in 4 or 5 days. So the Americans and the NATO is all helping Ukraine on the ground in Kharkiv very much, like in Kiev and everywhere else. The bottom line is that the Ukrainian army is resisting, and this shocked the entire world, shocked the Kremlin. Nobody could expect a long war for Ukraine, that it might last 2, 3, 4 more months, which is terrible for the civilians, like our opinion maker, our analyst underlined. He's completely right. This will be a very bad situation for the civilian and the people dying here. On the other hand, Dimitro, you are totally right. The military, the Ukrainian army, surprised and shocked the entire world, resisting. And frankly speaking, the United States is considering this resistance and even wants to find a way to give aircrafts to the Ukrainian, and maybe they want to defeat Putin. Nobody knows if the Ukrainian army will lose or win. This is unbelievable.
You're going to defeat Putin? It might be very costly. I don't understand how you can jump from that piece of logic that you're going to defeat Russia. They have nuclear weapons. Last time I checked.
Yeah, sure.
I can add some.
You're heading down the path of complete destruction, not only for there, but also in the entire world. I don't know how that makes any sense.
Even 8 years ago, after the two self-declared republics, the Lugansk and Donetsk declared their self-independence, the Ukraine army even cannot defeat them. And 8 years later, so how can they win this battlefield? And from the current situation, it is pretty hard. Yeah, even they lost partially for the airspace control. So I don't think so. Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, it's impossible to win for the Ukrainian, but I don't want to exaggerate.
But in some area.
It's important. It's important never to use in this conflict the nuclear weapons.
Here is the issue we would like to know in the Kharkiv. So previously we know 8 years ago the Kharkiv has also self-declared as a kind of republics, but later the Ukraine government sent their army in and to get the control. So now the fight is between the Ukraine army and Russian army. No local other armed forces involved. So only two sides. No other.
Exactly.
No other armed forces.
Thank you for this question. No other forces. If we say by that the Ukrainians are fighting alone with NATO weapons. No other people is involved. If we underline that Ukrainians are not left behind.
What is the sound there?
There is. By the way, let me tell you, there is a battalion, so-called International Brigade, which is composed by 20,000 people fighting from all over the world. So British people, Georgian army.
You mean the foreign mercenaries?
Soldiers. Yes, exactly.
The foreign mercenaries. But that was not protected by the international law.
Don't mass mercenaries. As volunteers. They're not mercenaries. They're not hired for payment. Mm-hmm. They are volunteering, coming to Ukraine to help.
But that is a mixed situation. There are some volunteers, but there are also some foreign mercenaries.
Well, you're going to have to give to also give your source.
Your source. All right.
Fair is fair.
Fair is fair. Yeah.
And volunteers. That's two different things.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you're saying they're volunteers. I mean, the important thing here is that we're trying to speak somewhat truthfully to people listening. So if you say something like they're all volunteers, please give a source. Give us some, the people out there, some indication that that's true. And if somebody says that they're mercenaries, they should do the same. But I mean, right now there's so many things flying all over the internet.
Anyway,
I thank you.
They support our side and they push their forces, not inspired other volunteers or missionaries. They are taking our side and fighting on our side. So that's no reason to dispute about who they are. The main is that they're here and they are on our side. They support our forces and make our purposes be more realizable.
And Oleg, you can...
Yeah, because actually President Zelensky, he sent a call outside of Ukraine for people to come.
Oh, you mean the Ukraine peacekeepers outside?
You have something to say about this?
Oleg?
Yeah, you can say it now. You can say it now.
What kind of sources of your information there in Kharkiv?
Sorry? I didn't hear you.
What the sources of your information in Kharkiv?
Yes, my source of information, thank you for asking, are sourced with people that I speak with my voice, with my eyes, and I have the luck.
And the city
behind. Let me answer. I have the luck to meet people in person. So about the international, they are volunteering and mercenary at the same time. I spoke with British guys telling me they make 3,000, 4,000 pounds every month. And they are going from to fight. Other people, like Dimitro said, are doing this on volunteering basis. So you both right. There are people which has been paid, but frankly speaking, I think this is not a problem.
Just asking.
So who is paying the 3,000 pounds?
Not that bad.
Martin?
People.
Who is paying the money?
There are money coming from the CIA. There are money coming from the United States of America.
Oh, are you sure about that?
The United
I've heard
Where do you know
the source?
That's an explosive accusation.
It sounds very seriously.
I take the responsibilities of that. The United States of America is paying British Army to fight in Ukraine.
The CIA is paying for
that is purposes like the Russia do on our country. That's not surprising that other countries support.
Marty, I still have to ask. Marty, I'm sorry. Still have to. This is an explosion. The CIA is paying for the British Army to fight in Ukraine.
Yes.
Where is that source? Or can you review the source that provides this information to you?
The source is Mattias Sorby himself. I spoke yesterday with British soldiers, and they confirmed that, and I published this story on a very important national daily in Italy. There is no scandal to say that the United States of America is giving money for foreign fighters to fight in Ukraine.
But anyway, we need some evidence.
He spoke to the soldiers. First-hand evidence. He confirmed that they're being paid by the CIA. He's published it already, and he's saying it here.
If you need some evidence, I am very happy to broadcast for the channel tomorrow, the day after tomorrow.
Not
live.
now. The network's
British.
Anyways, but this goes back to our original point. This is a geopolitical contest between the U.S. and Russia. Ukraine is suffering. Now, why isn't the U.S. and NATO at the table? If in fact they are paying fighters, supplying arms, isn't it going to be necessary for them to be there and for a whole solution to do it? And I would love to hear from any of you who are there, from the Russian or Ukrainian side.
I can't agree with your words because that's the previously talks demonstrated that some other countries paying for military people who fight here. But I want to admit that our military forces take the biggest part of these fights, and they fight well, they fight bravely, like my colleague told before. So only the small part of guests from other countries that are missionaries or volunteers, no matter.
Alex. Let me just interject there. You don't agree that there are mercenaries being paid by the CIA. Okay, put that aside. Are you receiving weapons? Are you receiving weapons?
I agree that support comes, but don't forget that Ukrainian has their own army, and this army is very powerful.
That's fine, but you're being supported by foreign.
Yes, we were supported, but we have all.
Should they be at the table?
That were demonstrated last days and demonstrated perfectly, because the aims of big country, the second or first
Alex, it's very clear you believe
that achieve any of their purposes in our country.
Excuse me.
Yes.
It's very clear you believe that in your countrymen and their ability to do a lot of damage, if not win the war. But let's put that aside. At some point, there has to be negotiations. Let's just take that as a should the European Union and the U.S. be at those negotiations, given that this is a geopolitical contest between them and that Ukraine is in the middle? And shouldn't they be there and take responsibility?
And I want you guys to hold your answer as sharp as possible. Can you just hold your answer as short?
I think that these sides have to be, but only after they will cover our skies, because our air, because we have no air forces, and only
so
damage that
no-fly zone, that is not possible.
They rejected it.
Yeah, for NATO members.
Yes, I understand that is not possible, but in this case, they have no chance to be involved in a negotiation.
No. Even for the Baltic countries, their leaders, they have rejected it. They said that the no-fly zone here is irresponsible, because that will make the Article 5 in the NATO Charter effective. That means the war between all NATO members and Russia. Yeah.
I understand, but that's the only way how Russia can influence Ukraine.
Well, no, I can look, Alex. I can understand. You want as much help as possible. You're in a terrible situation, and you would like NATO to come to your help. But you realize that we risk a nuclear war.
I just want the people who are not military didn't die under bombing. Because now the only way
let's see in a severe conflict.
May I say, please?
Oh,
the only way which Russia can influence Ukraine and make some advantage in negotiation is the bombing of civil persons, civil buildings. The only way when Russia can demonstrate his powers is the bombing of civil cities, and not in the real battlefield on the ground. As you can see, how many days the war is going on, and any purposes of big country were not achieved with.
Yeah, I want to get this conversation back to our chat room here in Beijing. There's a lot of people who are talking about this, our previous topic on the involvement of the NATO and U.S. in this conflict. And someone just said it's the real cause of the Russian-Ukraine conflict is NATO's pulling. If NATO does not seek confrontation with Russia, it should not reject Russia's application to join NATO. If Russia and Ukraine are both NATO members, there should be no Russia and Ukraine conflict.
Well,
what's your take on this new comment?
Russia applied to join NATO 3 times and was rebuffed each time. Each time it took this idea that it was rejected as an indication that it was the target.
Yeah.
And whether that's true or not, after 3 times you know you're not welcome. So at this juncture, yes, that could be a possible solution. Allow Russia to join NATO. But right now, with feelings running so high, very hard to see how everybody could get comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Shui, you have any takes on this?
Actually, world needs is negotiations. That's the most important, but it should be a common point of negotiations. Some common point Russia, Ukraine can speak about, and it depends from both sides.
Okay, it depends on
Oleg,
both sides.
what's your thought on that? Would that, if Russia was invited to join NATO, would that solve the situation?
What are our conditions for the for stopping the military action in the Ukraine? So that's very clear.
Okay.
I don't think that would be the solution. You see, from the U.S. national security agenda, Russia is one of the major targets, and if Russia joins NATO, so who will be the major power and the leader in this bloc? So I don't think that would be a solution.
But let's break this down. Right now, the U.S. has targeted two of the world's heavyweight nuclear powers, both Russia and China. How smart is that? What is the end game of this? That you can contain these two, one which is going to surpass you economically, the combined, they're a challenge to you militarily, and the rest of the world is watching. You remember that vote? The greatest number of people and the greatest landmass in the world did not go with the U.S. on this and NATO on this things. They were preferred to remain neutral or vote against it. This is a clear indication that we're entering a multipolar world. And what is needed here is for people to cool down, back off, and realize that there are different paths to prosperity, that you can't insist that everyone do it exactly the way you do, as long as they're not causing wars, as long as they're taking care of their people. Isn't that what we all want?
Yeah, so NATO is making Europe not insecure. Yeah.
Ken, you want to say
no
something?
Comment. I totally agree with our friend, our colleagues.
The coward's way out. Yeah, what they say.
What they say.
All right.
I have to repeat once again.
The Martia said, I agree too.
Martin,
I agree too. Okay, thank you,
right.
Martia. Thank you.
As Italian, the NATO is putting Europe in a very risky situation. And in the end of the day, this is a sacrifice for Ukraine. And frankly speaking, all the world is losing good gas from Russia, is losing economic relation with a very important country and world player as Russia. This is a very wild card of the United States and Europe.
Are we done?
And NATO that putting our civilian from Europe in a very risky place. I agree.
Thank you, Martia, and thank you to all of our CGTN streamers. Thank you, all of our streamers and our guests here in Beijing. And it was an informative debate and a discussion on this. As we said, this is the real cause of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. It's really complicated. So I'm looking forward for more discussion like that in our future episode of the chat room. So before we go, we have this clip for you. This is our CGTN reporter interview the different person on a street of Beijing on their views about the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine. Let's check it out. And this is chat room, and producing by China Global Television Network, and in Beijing. I'm Yang Zhao. Bye for now.
世界和平是最好的。
Stop this thing immediately.
最好的结果就是各退一步。
I think it will influence the whole world.
Have you ever followed the news about the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
有的
Yes.
没有 quite a lot.
现在天天看吧。
有大概了解一些。
I hear, but don't follow it.
有，我的抖音上全是他们的报道。
Of course. Yeah. Because I'm European.
So do you know what is going on? What is happening?
I have no idea.
Everybody is afraid. What's going on?
Either countries has their own rights to start this conflict in general. I don't really support neither because I'm against war in general.
So how do you think of this kind of conflict is affecting people?
肯定是伤感情。
I think it will influence the whole world.
It will be so bad because I have the experience for the conflict in Libya. So really I wish that it can be solved by dialogue, by sitting.
前阵的生活还都是像我们一样穿着就是很好的衣服，在就是街上啊逛街什么的。但下一秒我们还是这样子的一个状态，但是像他们国家的人就已经完全不是同一个。
天翻地覆的变化。
对。
Whatever are the situation between those leaders in general, I think it's better to solve it as soon as possible.
You know, I'm from Germany.
I
know war is horrible.
Because it's, at the end of the day, the people are suffering at the end of the day for who's right or wrong, you know.
What do you want to say to people from Russia and Ukraine?
Just take care and be safe, and wish they can come back to their hometown as soon as possible.
我就希望他们不管是中国留学生还是乌克兰的这个居民们，能够就是保护好自己，然后他们也心里肯定也祈祷这件战争快点结束吧。
I know that many refugees they will come to Germany from the Ukraine, and I hope that people will give them a warm welcome.
Stop this thing immediately, because again, as I said before, the ones that are suffering from that are normal people.
Exactly. What are your expectations for the talks between the two countries?
最好的结果就是各退一步。
I hope that at least they find out the best solution for both to stop this.
百姓们能够以最快的一个速度恢复到之前的生活状态，这个是我最希望的。
In 2022, we used to be we have to be diplomatic on these things and negotiate it, not killing people.
更多的百姓、平民百姓、无辜的人能够安全的活在自己的家园里。
我们联合国的秘书长古特雷斯他也说了，就是 the normal people sacrifice the most， 就是最普通的老百姓是损失最大的。希望可以和平解决，各退一步，然后和平解决。
对，还是希望和平解决。
And I wish them peace for all over the world. Really, I wish that for all.